Yeah, Jasmine and Suzanne are on.
Oh, cool.
Suzanne
Yes, have a
doesn't
good
have
night.
video
Go
right
back
now.
upstairs.
That's fine.
Oh, there's.
There I am.
Oh,
We got it. All right.
We good?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Picking County Planning and Zoning regular meeting. Today is Tuesday, December 3rd. And we have present Jeffrey, Jasmine, and Suzanne. And Doug, sorry. Yeah, Doug, Jeffrey. It's gonna be confusing. And I guess we'll start. Does anyone have any commissioner comments?
No.
Planning staff?
I guess I'll just note that Jeffrey Woodruff this was gonna be his last meeting with you guys, but, I know the board is still moving upstairs, so I guess we want to go back up, so. Sounds like he's gonna ditch us for this evening. And I think the only other thing, the lighting code is finally going on first reading to the VOCC tomorrow. And hopefully it will then be adopted in January, so. Just an update on the new team recently, but, that's it.
Okay. Bonnie, do we have any members of the public that would like to comment on anything right now?
I have no members of the public online.
All right, great. Tonight on the agenda, we are gonna start with a land use action, looks like. Land use code text amendment for the seasonal farm worker housing.
Oh, look, no.
Oh, did I skip something?
You have the wrong
agenda.
Dan, I'll hang that over
Sorry about that. Oh, no, you're right. I got the wrong thing up. The Shaven GMQS allotment for the rural and residential activity envelope site plan review. Tam.
Go ahead and I'm gonna share my screen with Bonnie.
Okay.
Great. So this is the Joel H. Shakeman Residence Trust application for a GMQS allotment for additional floor area in the rural area. They've also requested a GMQS exemption for a TDR receiver site and activity envelope and site plan review. So the process tonight, and the board is welcome to change this process, but I thought I'd start off with my presentation, let the applicants present anything they want to present, and then let public comment speak, but doesn't seem like we have any. And then at that point, the P&Z could choose to accept staff scoring or score the application. And then if the application does meet threshold, then the P&Z can separately consider the request for activity envelope and site plan review or the TDR request. Right? So I'll just run through a little bit of background. I believe the applicants are here tonight. If they want to,
Yes, we are.
go ahead and introduce yourselves for the record.
I'm Joel Shankman. You're owner of the property and
Randy Shankman, his wife, also owner of the property, but we're
Okay.
here.
Okay, thank you. And they are represented here by Erin Wackerly with Brendan and Adams and Chris as well. So on the screen is the location of the property. It's 170 North Starwood Drive, which is also known as R21 in the Starwood subdivision. It is within the RS20 zone district and it contains about 4 acres. So a little bit of background. In 1962, the Starwood subdivision was created. And with that was the creation of the lot. In 1973, the assessor has it developed with a single family residence. We do have a OWTS permit from that same year for a system size 15 bedrooms. And then we also have records of another OWTS permit in 1987 to expand the system to accommodate up to 5 bedrooms. And other than that, no other land use approvals, building permits, certificates of occupancy, were found for the lots. Right now, the applicant estimates that the residents have approximately 6,449 square feet of floor area. So with their activity envelope and site plan review requests, they are wanting to redevelop the residence to build up to 9,250 square feet. With that, they're also requesting to expand the existing auto court, which is to the south of the house right here, as well as build a new auto court. They'll relocate and expand the septic field and do some landscaping improvements. For the GMQS allotment, the original request or the original application, it said they were requesting 2,883 square feet up to 3,500 square feet. There was an amendment to their application based on some of zoning's comments about their floor area calculations. So they tried to nail down the existing floor area a little bit better for zoning. And so they've changed that request to 2,801 square feet. As I mentioned before, there was no demonstration of pre-existing legal floor area over 5,750 feet. So staff is assuming that to build up to the 9,250 square feet, they're going to need to request an allotment of 3,500 square feet. And then also part of the application was a request to utilize a TDR to develop up to that 9,250 square feet in the event that the GMQS allotment is not granted. So this application was referred to all the agencies on the screen, and we did receive comments from our typical agencies that do comment as noted. I'm going to start with the activity envelope and site plan review portion of this application, just because it gives a little bit of context to the site. So for activity envelope and site plan review approval, they need to comply with the provisions shown on the screen within Chapter 7. Shown on the screen here is the proposed activity envelope, which encompasses where my arrow is pointing. Back. So the first portion is site preparation and grading. They did provide some preliminary civil plans and have shown that grade or drainage can be accommodated on site, likely with some kind of dry well or basin. More detailed plans will be provided to comply with that site preparation and grading portion of the code. The next section is the steep and potentially unstable slopes. So on the right-hand side, you can see their slope analysis map. And the white areas are slopes from 0 to 15%. The green is 15 to 30. And the orange is 30 to 45, and red is over 45%. The activity envelope isn't really drawn on that, so you have to kind of visualize or imagine this activity envelope on the slope analysis map. So you can see that there are slopes within the activity envelope that exceed 30%. And per the section 7/2020, any development on those steep slopes is only permitted where there's no alternative location. It's within a legally platted subdivision recorded prior to 1972, and an engineer or geologist licensed in the state of Colorado demonstrates that the site can be engineered so that there's no hazard posed by the location of the development on those slopes. So as we noted, the Starwood subdivision was created prior to 1972. However, staff believes that there are a lot of areas within that activity envelope that aren't necessary for the development, and therefore should be excluded. And we provided those comments to the applicant, and they were working towards amending that activity envelope to bring it in a bit. And I'm guessing they have that to present to you tonight. And then the last portion for compliance with that section is to demonstrate, or have an engineer demonstrate that there's no hazard posed by inclusion of those steep slopes. So, if that can be demonstrated, then, that section, the P and Z can find that section is compliant. The next section to talk about is the wildlife habitat areas. So the applicant did hire an ecologist and to assess the site and, in a nutshell, well, I guess I speak around. So on the map on the left is the elk habitat map. The areas in blue, light blue, is elk winter habitat range, and then this hatched area is severe winter range. And per the land use code, the severe winter range is considered a constraint. And the ecologist found that essentially due to the existing development and the development in the surrounding neighborhood, that impacts to those elk have basically already occurred. And that it's possible that indirect impacts to the elk could occur during construction, and therefore they've provided a bunch of recommendations around winter construction timing and kenneling dogs, and exterior lighting. The applicant has committed to comply with those recommendations. CPW also reviewed the application and provided similar recommendations and found that the property was indeed within an elk and mule deer winter range. So the next couple sections I'll touch on is the wildlife hazard area. Again, the applicant did hire a professional to analyze the site who confirmed that the site is within a severe wildfire area, as shown in this map here. And he did provide our standard recommendations for mitigation. And then the scenic view protection sections, this is a property that's located within the McLean Flats Scenic View Protection Corridor, Highway 82, as well as the Elk Creek Protection Corridor. But you can tell from this image here that due to the distance from those roads and topography and vegetation, that it's going to be very unlikely that you'll be able to see much of any kind of development on this site. But nonetheless, the applicant has committed to utilize indigenous earth tone colors and bring all their lighting into compliance with the lighting code. And the last section I'll touch on is the renewable energy use section. So they have committed to wiring the roof to be solar ready, which is required by the code. However, they're proposing to place their solar panels below the auto port, and this here where my cursor is. And per the code, it says rooftop panels are preferred over ground mounted panels, unless good cause is demonstrated to the community development department that ground mounted panels are necessary or a better solution for the site. So the applicant's response is that they spoke with the Starwood HOA, who preferred the ground mounted due to any kind of visual impacts roof mounted may have. Staff doesn't believe that's a reason for good cause or a better solution for the site. And so if activity envelope is approved, staff would recommend that a condition of approval be required to show compliance with this renewable section of the code. All right, so I'm going to move on to the growth management section of their application request. So there is 3,500 square feet of floor area available in the rural area for additional floor area. As I touched on before, there was no demonstration that the floor area exceeding 5750 was legally created. Therefore, staff's assuming the request is for 3,500 square feet of floor area to build up to the maximum allowed. There were no other applications in this 2024 GMQS competition. So this chart on the screen is the points and the respective categories for scoring. for additions in the rural area, the minimum threshold required for an allotment is 20 points. One of the standards within the GMQS allotment is the proportionality standard, which states when scoring an application, the P and Z should consider whether each commitment made by the applicant seeking points is proportional to the size of the allotment being requested. In other words, an applicant seeking an allotment for a large amount of floor area would be expected to make a proportionally greater commitment to obtain the same score as an applicant seeking a lesser amount of floor area. Staff and the P and Z have always kind of had a hard time with this because proportionality isn't defined in the code. It's not a monetary value. Because a lot of our commitments that we see are hard to put a monetary value to. So one way that applicants in the past have demonstrated proportionality is to look back at similar projects and compare, their allotment requests with the commitments being made. So the applicant has committed to the following categories on the screen. So $500 basically to all those different agencies. These agencies down here, these categories were for the bonus points. And I can dive in deeper to each of these categories if the board wants me to. I'm going to assume that you read the attachment in the packet, which goes deeper into staff justification for each of the scores provided. But in a nutshell, we gave the application a score of 14 as shown on the screen. And that was due to staff's opinion that the $500 commitments in those top 5 categories was not proportional to the 3,500 square feet being requested. I could throw out similar applications in the past where things were awarded or they weren't awarded, but they always had a bigger commitment than those $500 commitments. So with that, I'll just wrap it up and say that staff recommends the planning commission accepts staff score 14 points. And with that, that means that the applicant is not eligible for an allotment. And pursuant to section 640.20, the activity envelope and site plan would need to be denied as well. Let me know if you have any more questions or want me to go back and go into further detail into that scoring category or I would like the applicants to present. And we can do questions later.
I guess I'd like to look at the plan.
Okay.
I get it more.
Suzanne or Jasmine, do you have any questions for Tammy before we pass this over to the applicant?
I have no questions.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, and Doug, were you asking like for more explanation
Well,
behind staff scores or like actually walking through the staff scoring or are you just
I was just trying to understand, I apologize, but I was under the impression that we were talking about the other one, thing. It was, I believe, on the February 7th. Anyway, I misunderstood what Stephen's meeting was, or I didn't understand. I thought what that was talking about was the housing for the young, and so I'm not as prepared as I feel like I should.
Then hopefully I go to kind of walk through the categories
Okay.
and people will.
We'll be walking through them.
If you're gonna go through them, then we certainly don't need to apply, so.
Okay, I mean, we have a different scoring. and that, so, yeah.
You want to just pass it over to the applicant?
Let's just pass it over to that.
Go ahead.
There we go. There's a leg there. Good evening. I'm Erin Wackerly. This is Chris Bendon. We're both with Bendon Adams. And to our right over here are Joel and Randy Shakeman, applicants and owners of the property at 170 North Starwood. I want to thank and acknowledge everyone also on the design team, Charles Cuniff Architects, project architect, Land Design 39, landscape architect, and SGM civil engineer. As Tammy mentioned, tonight we're here requesting approval for a growth management allotment, use of a transferable development right, activity envelope, and site plan review. We appreciate all your time and dedication to the board, to the community, and we also want to thank staff for all your work on this application as well. In terms of the background, Tammy covered a lot of that, so I will not repeat what she said. I just wanted to note a couple items that this is outside of the urban growth boundary. And as Tammy mentioned, it's not visible from Highway 82, McLean Flats, or Owl Creek Road. All properties that we work with have some level of hazards present. A few constraints do exist on this site, which is pretty typical for the area. As you can see, there's intermittent slopes that are present on the property. And it's also mapped within a wildlife corridor and within wildfire hazard range. However, we don't believe that any of these hazards will be an impediment to development, and that we can work through any commentary with county staff and or via conditions of approval. The site is outside of geologic hazards, and it's not within any floodplains or mapped waterways. As Tammy mentioned, we have worked with an ecologist. He provided a series of wildfire and wildlife mitigation techniques that have proven to be successful in previous projects, and the applicants are committed to undergoing all these recommendations. Hazards are present here on this property, and they're really no surprise and really no different than any other project we've seen in the Starwood neighborhood. The activity envelope is still being worked through by the design team. There have been iterations that have been presented that will trim the envelope down. And the civil engineer has opined via email that the slopes that are in excess of 45% are man-made. We will have the engineering report formally updated, and we can resubmit all of that along with the activity envelope prior to finalizing any sort of land use approval. The home was purchased by the applicants in 1992. It is believed that the home was developed in 1973. We know that the home was legally built as it's part of the Starwood subdivision, which is a legally established and county approved subdivision. However, in 1970, permit files were a little bit thin. So sometimes when we undergo due diligence of a property, we often, or at least sometimes can find several different documents and county records that provide, an adequate kind of trail for us to know when the property was developed. It could be, a full permit set. Sometimes there's even scratch notes. However, that was not the case with this property. We diligently researched all the past records to the extent that they were available. Typically when I'm researching or the background of a property, there's times where I am sifting through hundreds of pages. On this project, I found only 2 records. The 2 documents you see on the screen is the entirety of the county's online records for this property. Both of them are on-site wastewater treatment system permits, one from 1973, one from 1987. Master permits or certificates of occupancy were also not located within the county archives. So once again, during the time these permits, these 2 permits here for on-site wastewater were pulled, it was prior to growth management. Record keeping of that era was just not as we expect it to be today. as far as county aerial mapping goes, it goes back as far as 1991. While this doesn't show a depiction of what the property looked like in 1970, we wanted to go back as far as we could to show that 91, that the property existed in the same basic configuration as what is current today. Now I want to go over the request. We underwent some as-built calculations that showed that the property contains 6,449 square feet of gross floor area. Properties in the Starwood subdivision and rural area of Pickens County are allowed a base development right of 5,750 square feet with the ability to augment the floor area via growth management or use of a TDR up to 9,250 square feet. We're requesting growth management approval to increase the house size by 2,801 square feet or a maximum of 9,250 square feet. We feel confident in the as-built calculation of, the 6,449 square feet. However, due to the scarcity of the previous permitting records and to the extent that staff might be more comfortable with us requesting 3,500 square feet, we can adjust the request of 2,801 square feet to the 3,500 square feet or a maximum house size of 9,250 square feet. The expansion that is proposed will add to the existing house by enlarging the footprint. It'll be built above and below grade. On the screen is an overall architectural site plan. The yellow highlight indicates livable areas that will be added onto. The small blue area is additional roof that's being updated, and then the green shows deck expansions. This next page on the left shows the existing conditions, the existing floor plans. To the right shows floor plans of all the levels of the home, with the yellow indicating all the proposed expansions. And this page includes both deck and livable area. These plans are conceptual in nature and are likely to be adjusted a little bit between now and permit submittal. All the development will comply with Pickens County Code. As I mentioned, the activity envelope is to still be finalized and provided to staff, along with the updated civil engineering report. In terms of commentary regarding solar, we are able to comply with the requirement to relocate them to the roof. And now, Chris Bendon is going to talk to you a little bit about our proposed scoring and what we're requesting through growth management.
Okay, thanks, Erin. Good evening. So I'm going to talk for a little bit, and then I'm going to hand it off to Joel and Randy to tell you a little bit about themselves. We submitted close to a year ago, so they've been anxious to tell you about who they are and just what the application is about. So our proposed scoring is 20, as you see on the screen, which is a passing score, and I'm going to walk through that scoring sort of point by point. First, want to tell you about our approach to the growth management. And I know there's been a sort of ongoing conversation with the Planning and Zoning Commission. No surprise, I was the planning director for the city of Aspen. We have a growth management system at the city, and same conversations about how to do scoring. Should it be a beauty contest? Should it be a first come, first serve? Should it be a lottery? Should, blah, blah, blah. The county's growth management system is drafted in a sort of a theoretical world, and I'll explain that, where projects come in, they have the ability to create some trail connection, they can create meaningful open space, they can develop a bus stop, they can literally put more water into the river somehow. And if that property exists, it's a very unique property. Most properties in Pickens County are simply a lot in a subdivision. And the subdivision is established, the roads are already there, the fire suppression system is in place. In our condition, we already have a house. There's no ability or no point of creating a trail from one side of the property to the other. It's an existing lot within a subdivision. The county has a system for allocating additional square footage each year, and you meter that out through your growth management system. And it's a way of saying we're only going to grow by this amount per year. That's the system we have. When there is more demand than supply, the scoring becomes really important. And the highest score projects are able to go forward. And I'll come back and talk about proportionality, but that's also a very critical piece that I'll touch on. When it's not a competitive environment, it's just about meeting the basic threshold scoring to be able to move forward. As I said, we have just a lot in the subdivision. We don't have additional water rights to grant. We're not providing a new trail system. So our scores are on the basic infrastructure of meeting the minimum standards to move forward. Everything else is a matter of demonstrating our base commitment to achieve the base square footage, our base sort of commitment in each of those standards, and our additional commitment within that category. So that's the way I'll be talking about these things. For better or worse, those extra additional commitments, when you have a lot that's in an established subdivision, translate into cash contributions for various different beneficiaries through the community. And that's sort of the way the system works, especially when you have these established lots. There's no guidance in the county code on how much cash an applicant is expected to pay to demonstrate extra commitment and to achieve a passing score. Talking with staff, and I think you may have the same feeling, they would maybe feel differently if the Schenkmans were writing larger checks to the various commitments that they've made. I feel for you as commissioners. This is inherently an uncomfortable position for everyone to be in, where you're essentially asking the question, and we've been asking the question, how much is needed to achieve a yes vote? And so feel for you, but that's the system that we have. That's the system that we're in. I know there's discussion of amending the system. There probably always will be a discussion of amending the system. But this is the system that we have chosen, and we're staying within the system that we have. I'm going to go through the scores. Again, our scores are based on combination of reaching the baseline expectation in that category, and to the extent that we have an extra commitment in that category. On the first one is fire protection systems. We have an existing neighborhood that has its own fire suppression systems. There's hydrants throughout the neighborhood. The road systems are there. The water pressure is there. We are so we have a standard score of. Let me just touch on this for a second. So the scores are 0, 1, or 2. 0 is if you're doing something far below what the minimum standards are. The minimum standard gets a score of 1, and exceeding that, sort of a compliance plus, if you will, gets us a score of 2. So we have the road system, we have the fire suppression system. We actually developed, and Randy will talk about this, a fire station, a substation within the Starwood subdivision that has apparatus and employee housing. So the fire suppression system is in place. In addition to that, we are providing funds towards the mitigation program for the fire district. So we are proposing a score of 2 in that category because we are a compliance plus. Regarding road system, the Starwood neighborhood is served with an adequate road system network. We are not proposing any change to that. There hasn't been any identification of needing to upgrade that. So in that category, we think we comply. We're not doing anything additional, but we should get a score of 1 because we reached that baseline. Regarding transit and trails, I mentioned there's no point of doing a public trail from one side of the property to the other. We are providing, and when you go through the scoring, that equates to a score of 1. We are exceeding that by providing funds towards the WeCycle roundabout to ABC expansion project, which has been identified as a desirable near-term project by Pickens County. So in that category, we are a compliance plus. So we allocated 2 points to that category. Regarding the environment, we are committing funds towards Roaring Fork Conservancy. I want to walk through the standards on water resources, because I believe that we reach compliance on these. They talk about having a minimum stream setback. It's not really applicable condition for us. Dedication of water rights as a lot within the subdivision. The Schenkmans don't have they don't have water rights to grant. There's no irrigation water rights for agricultural open space lands that really apply to this. Standards talk about dedicating remaining water rights to minimum in-stream flows. Again, they don't have water rights to dedicate. And providing a water augmentation plan upstream of the development, and they have no capacity to be able to do that. So we believe we comply with those standards to the extent that we can. In addition, we're providing funds to the Roaring Fork Conservancy, and their mission is focused principally on in-stream flows. So in this category, we think we have a compliance plus, and we've allocated 2 points to that. For wildlife habitat, again, we're a lot within an established subdivision. To the extent that we can, we are staying out of the restricted areas and don't have any real opportunity to improve habitat on our limited property. We are committing additional funds to the Roaring Fork Safe Passages project. I'm sure you're aware of this project, trying to create safe crossings along Highway 82 to minimize vehicle and wildlife incidents. So in this category, we believe that we are providing the minimum plus, compliance plus, and we have assigned 2 points to this category. Open space preservation, sorry, this is sounding a little repetitive. As a lot within a subdivision, we don't have open space to dedicate. The standards talk about, when you're in that kind of position where you don't have open space to contribute, you should be receiving a score of 1. In addition to that, we're committing funds to the Aspen Valley Land Trust towards the Kaufman Ranch property. And if you have the opportunity to go on the property, I went on the property for a project we were working on regarding wetland enhancement. And it's a gorgeous property, and it's a great addition to our green infrastructure, if you will. So because we are compliance plus, we've allocated 2 points to that category. Aaron talked about hazard avoidance. We scored that with 1 point, as the code advises, when you are in a position where you're doing everything you can to minimize the hazards that are presented. For developing below the density, the code allocates or suggests allocation of 1 point when you're in a position where you don't have any ability to lower the density. This would be the case if we had 500 acres and the Schenkmans had the ability to do 250 homes, but they were coming in with far less. We have one house on one lot, and it's not a reasonable position to lower the density. So the code advises 1 point on that provision. Lastly, the reduction in mass. We are proposing to build out to the allowed 9250 square feet. So we did not allocate any points to that reduction in mass. I would like to say, though, that as sort of an aside, that reduction in mass is kind of focused on the sort of the visual impacts of mass. And this property is not highly visible, really visible at all, remember, any public way until you're practically on the property. So we haven't allocated any points, but I felt like I needed to say that. You know, I think our reading of these standards and how the code suggest how points should be assigned to this is a very objective reading of the code. And I think if you have a dispassionate scoring, you would reach the same conclusion, following exactly what the code says. I do want to talk about this proportionality concept because I think it does have importance to this conversation. In my experience, the proportionality concept is useful when you are faced with trying to create a distinction between two similar applications. So the concept of the word itself is when you're comparing two things. And the language that Tammy was showing you before talks about when you have, projects of the same score and one project is asking for more floor area. So it allows you to create, or essentially the code is giving you an out if you're in a jam. If you have two projects that score the same way and you're trying to differentiate, you can use this concept of proportionality so your decision doesn't appear arbitrary. So let's say that you had two exact applications in front of you, both scoring 20 points. One of the applications was seeking 1,000 square feet, and one was seeking 2,000. You could say, well, the application with 1,000 square feet proportionally is providing more to the community, and therefore they should get first crack at the allotment for the year. So it gives you a rational basis to create that differentiation. It doesn't have any practical use when you have a single application. You're not comparing, two or more things. And to say somehow that the contributions are not proportional necessitates that you have a standard that says what compliance looks like. And that takes us back to our conversation of that question, the uncomfortable question of how much of a dedication or contribution to something is enough. The code doesn't say that. The code is in fact silent, and I think the code at some level didn't anticipate that you'd have to be having this conversation about cash contributions to achieve scoring. So, is the cash contribution proportional? If you have an answer to that, that means that you know what the baseline should be, right? That you're saying that in order to achieve a yes, you have half of what's needed, or you have a third of what's needed, or something. That means that you know what is needed. And if you don't know what that denominator is, you don't have a way to rationally say what percentage that we're at. I'll give you non-land use examples. You get pulled over for going too fast. And your question is going to be, well, what's the speed limit? Well, if you're going 45 and a 35, you have two things to compare, and you can say going 45 is too fast. If you go to Elitch's and you're too short to get on the ride, you say, well, what height is required? Well, you stand next to the thing and you're either shorter than the thing or you're tall enough to go on the ride. You have a way to compare two things, and you have a proportionality, rational sort of decision. So I don't think you have that when you have one single application. You just have a conversation of, does the application meet the minimum scoring? Joel and Randy are the homeowners, and we've asked Joel to provide you a snippet short of who they are, and we've asked Randy to provide you with some notes on her involvement in this Starwood HOA that hopefully you find is interesting. Thanks for listening to me. Certainly will be happy to address questions that I'm almost guaranteed that you will have when we circle back. For that, Joel.
Okay. Joel Shankman,
thank you for, giving your time to listen to our story and living in Aspen. I'll make it brief, fast forward, I grew up in South Florida, attended Emory University, undergraduate, short time, didn't graduate 3 years, and they somehow accepted me to medical school, University of Miami Miller School of Medicine. That was like in 73. The year 76, 77, my last year of medical school, you can go and do an externship. And I came and did an externship actually in rheumatology, University of Colorado, and the VA hospital taking care of military veterans who some of them were rodeo clowns. At that time, I was able to ski, really started skiing, came out to Colorado, to Aspen and other ski resorts. I came here quite frequently on the weekends, and I used to stay at the T-Lazy 7 in bunk bed for financial constraints at $7 a night for a bunk bed. During that year before I graduated, I met my wife, Randy Schenkman, who was a third-year medical student at the same medical school. And anyway, we got engaged. I brought her out here in the January 1978. And at that time, introduced her to skiing. And we stayed at that time where Marine Creek Club is. There was a place called the Park Meadows Motel at $18 a night. I was making more money as an intern in general surgery. Knowing that even though I did rheumatology the year before, I went into orthopedics and I became a trauma, sports medicine, orthopedic surgeon, trained down at Jacksonville Hospital, which is a level 1 trauma hospital. So we started coming out at that time. Our children, we bought out age 18 months and 3 years, and they skied here, learned how to ski. I brought my folks out. My kids are big now. My daughter is my in-house contractual attorney, who actually lives here now in Snowmass. She's general counsel for her husband's company, and very proud of her. She's a real mountain woman. She participated last year in the Power of 2, Power of 4, and her team, co-ed team, came in #1. So I have a lot to compete with my daughter. My son is my CFO vice president for my various companies. He lives in Massachusetts with 2 other grandchildren. They come out here to stay at the house. And then at the same time, when I purchased the house in 92, I was fortunate enough to do that. My parents would come out with us, starting probably once our kids were 4 and 3 years old, and they enjoyed coming here with us. We stayed in Snowmass, and then I had the home, so they would be coming to the home with us. So 4 generations have really lived in this home. We had a vision of doing something. Luckily, I worked hard in orthopedics, created some other businesses. I actually retired from full-time orthopedic 2006. I'm very involved with my health system and my chief resident who trained me, who I hired. He hurt his arm. He actually lives on Hopkins here, part-time in South Florida. And so we had a vision to expand the home so the families could use it and enjoy it. We've been here through every season, winter, summer, and in the fall season. So the vision that you see in these pictures and this expansion is, what Randy and I have envisioned to expand the house so the family can use it to the next 5th and 6th generation, hopefully. And hopefully I'm around to see all that. So that's where we are. My boss is over here to the right, and she can give you a little information about her. This is the real doctor. All right.
Well, hello, everybody, and thank you for giving us your time. I am a doctor. I'm a radiologist. My specialty is women's imaging and breast imaging. And I started that at one of the hospitals in Miami, which has now expanded to over 10 hospitals. I started their first outpatient center. It's now over 100 outpatient centers, all doing women's imaging and breast imaging. And when we first came out here, when Joel brought me out, when we were engaged, we both fell in love with Aspen. We just did. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. We brought our kids out. They loved it here. His parents loved it here. And we were very happy when we bought the house. The house is in Starwood, and I have been on the Starwood Homeowners Association for 23, 24 years. I was one of the people who pushed and voted for everything we needed to do to get the fire station put in to Starwood, which also takes care of the surrounding areas on McLean's Flats and White Horse Springs, the whole area. We were so happy to be able to do that and also have the firefighters there with affordable housing. I also was part of the committee that was very proactive in the wildfire mitigation for Starwood. And we have worked really, really hard trying to take care of our entire subdivision to protect not just Starwood, but the whole surrounding area from wildfires. It's very, very important. And I've been very much involved with that. So that's all I'll say for now.
Can I add one thing? We were talking about commitment to the community and stuff. Once we bought our home up in Starwood, we were here, multiple, all year long, different seasons. We have been committed philanthropically to the Aspen Valley Foundation annually. My grandchildren, the ABSC, the ski snowboard thing, I contribute to that. Now recently when I went to the Aspen High School aviation program, Jazz Aspen, which has an affiliation with the Frost School of Music at the University of Miami. So we didn't just start by the time I did this application. We've been committed to the community.
Also for the wildfire, for Aspen Wildfire
Foundation that just got started. We had a fundraising that we committed to. So, we're committed to the community.
And have been for many, many, many years.
So just to, say that. Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay. I guess I'll start with, see if we have any, what questions we have from any of the commissioners, or applicants or staff in reference to the application.
I have some questions and comments.
Go ahead.
My name is Suzanne. To both Dr. Shinkman, I'm so glad that you're here and so glad to hear how committed you are. I'm especially delighted about your commitment to wildlife, to fire protection. As you know, as all of us know, that is increasingly right in our faces, literally sometimes. And we're all need to be more cautious, and we certainly are more aware of the wildfire hazards. To that end, one of my concerns is that you live in a wildfire hazard area, that your home is there now. And so the thought of expanding that and exposing your family that you have described so lovingly, I mean, I already like them. The grandchildren, your parents that have been here to visit, and I want to see that you stay safe. So that I need to underline that fire protection is for your home and for those around it is very important to me. And I have a question of your representative who said, let me see, I made a note about that not only are you doing the basic or being compliant with fire protection, which would say 1 point, but that you are going beyond that. But I question that. I don't understand quite how you would give it a 2 instead of a 1 point.
Yeah, I can address that.
Would you please?
So the Schenkmans, to start with your kind of initial comment, they're very aware of wildfire considerations. As Randy was saying, it's something that's important to the HOA and to the Metro District there. They went as far as organizing to tax themselves to dedicate land and to construct a substation for the Aspen Fire Protection District that has apparatus and housing facilities there. By and large, all of Starwood is in the same sort of predicament where they're in severe wildfire mapping.
Yes.
And even if they, an individual parcel is for the same road system and the same concern. So, they're all highly there. Homes in Starwood, excuse me, need to go through, the full permitting, and there's a certain sort of technical hardening, if you will, of homes to ensure that they have the sort of the best physical defense, the structure themselves against wildfire. The road system, the hydrant system, the substation I mentioned, those are all sort of existing conditions. Yeah, which are, when you read the code, adequate for scoring of 1 point. In addition to that, and this is where the scoring says you get 2 points if you're doing the compliance plus. They have funds that are dedicated to the Aspen Fire Protection District mitigation plan, which is a sort of a newer effort to be able to assist property owners, HOAs, in wildfire reduction, wildfire risk reduction, kind of throughout the community. So that's a newer effort that the Schenkmans have dedicated funds to, both through this application and through their own personal efforts, kind of before and probably ongoing after this.
Chris, I will have to say that what exists in Firewood, in Starwood, in terms of its fire protection now, has come about by the actions of other homeowners and especially the Schenkmans. And I see that as basic. That's just basic, that a community like Aspen requires that people have basic protection. And the location of Starwood, since it's fairly far away from downtown, needed that extra help, but I still see that as basic. And I can't quite go along. I mean, I can't go along with, at this point, at thinking that then a donation to the foundation of $500 would give it an extra point. I'm going to keep listening, but that's where I am right now. But Chris, I had one other comment. And you're talking about proportionality. You're right that that's difficult, and one of the first things I learned when I was on P and Z the first time years ago was that we can't read the land use code and count on it to be objective. It's not. You're going to come up on situations where it's just flat out subjective, and so you have to use your best judgment. It seems to me that proportionality in this case is comparing, when you were talking about there's nothing to compare this to, for me, proportionality in this particular application has to do with what exists now and what will exist if this application is approved. So that's where I stand on this. And in that regard, I go back to the thinking of, can I justify in my own conscience and judgment expanding something, a home or any other structure that is in a severe wildlife hazard, knowing what we know now that we didn't know in 1992, having to do with climate change and how that's affecting us.
Yeah, and I certainly understand your concerns about the wildfire. I think what we have in front of you is a growth management app with a scoring that is, one of the pathways to achieve an expansion of the home. So, you mentioned the code sort of is what it is, but once for, to build a home of 9250 and certain, enhanced requirements for the, sprinklering and protection of the home and so on, if you're in a zone like this. So in a certain sense, we're no different than any other property in Starwood, many of which, use a TDR to achieve the square footage.
Mm-hmm.
And we're approached it slightly differently with this growth management scoring route.
Yes, I understand. They're fortunate to have you representing them.
I would just like to add to that also that the design of the new home will encompass all updated exterior materials. Windows, siding, roofing, everything that'll be wildfire compliant. And then we didn't go into the specific details of what was recommended in the ecological report, but one of the recommendations was to create a mitigation zone specifically on this property, which is included in the activity envelope and slated as part of the proposed development.
Thank you. That brings up another question for me, and I'll make this quick. Just a moment ago, you mentioned a couple of times that and I think the planning staff also referred to this, that in the future, we would get more detail on this. But it seems to me that the Planning and Zoning Commission should be going forward with all the detail that could possibly be given. And that should be given first before we are doing a proper scoring.
Yeah, let me touch on that. I think the additional information I was referred to is some tying up of the building or the activity on the map, which the design teams looked at. It's entirely doable. It's a matter of tightening that up in concert with staff. I think the way we've approached it is typically the land use approval is granted through administrative decision. If we weren't going through a growth management review, it would be approved through administrative decision with a series of conditions. And many of those conditions would relate to tidying up of the map, right? Changes to the activity envelope to X out a certain area. So, the design team has looked at that. I think our approach was to have this conversation about the square footage and the scoring. And if that is successful, then it makes sense to go ahead and make those changes to the map. I can assure you that staff would not file a map that they were not 100% satisfied with.
However, they don't know what the final product is going to be yet. And I think that, I know that from years ago when I was on the Planning and Zoning Commission, and now this time, the staff, many things have become administrative tasks that weren't before. However, when I sit on a committee like this, I want to know everything I can know before I start saying it's worth 1 or 2, or instead of finding out later on that I hope that the staff will do its job. I know that they do, but then why am I here? Well, that's just one of my concerns.
Yeah. Again, I'd suggest that this is, the mapping and the areas to the activity envelope is sort of a fine tuning exercise of the mapping, that I wouldn't worry too much about in terms of how, I don't see it affecting the scoring really at all.
I do. I do. And I know you're doing the best that you can with what you have right now. But in talking about my comfort level, in accepting this position, I feel a lot of responsibility to really do my job. And I'm not only speaking to you, but to the staff in this. But anyway, I know other people have other questions, and I hope you'll go on with that.
Thanks, Suzanne. Questions?
So I also had some questions on the scoring.
Mhm.
Some of them are gonna be like precedent. Starwood, as I understand, is a obviously we're going, it's allowed to have bigger homes, so that's easy. But like fire protection, transit trails, I mean, looking through the list there, they've got to get a 2 on virtually every one of them to get the thing. Look, as Chris said, there's not a lot of room for them in a lot of these areas. But to take 2 for fire protection, is Starwood, is that are we setting a precedence? Are there other homes in Starwood that have got a 2 for fire protection and transit and jail, water resources and wildlife habitat and open space preservation? I mean, so to me, I'm kind of looking for some historical basis. So, right, is this charting new territory, or is this kind of the way that Starwood has been allowed? I mean, I don't know if any of those houses have gone through the US and Starwood.
Yeah. I guess all of them. I mean, I've been on the board for 7-8 years now, and I've never seen a GMQS application from Starwood. Or I can't remember one, maybe we have, but there are some, issues that I agree with Doug that pop up in my mind, especially, I will say this board, we were in the process where we approved the Starwood Firehouse, and that was really amazing. And we spent a lot of time working on that, getting that approved. And you guys did a really good job. The board, the Starwood HOA, everybody did an amazing job. And I remember one of the main issues is that Starwood only has one road entry and exit from that whole subdivision. So if there is a fire up there that goes across the road, that's one of the amazing things now, that there's the firehouse above that could be inside of that and create sort of a quick response team. There are some issues in Starwood that the fact that it is one of the only private gated neighborhood in Aspen. So there is no access to, like, if you had a ranch in Old Snowmass or something and you were going to connect to another trail, like all the trails up there are private, all the access to all the trails from there out to other open spaces private. So it sort of cuts their ability off to do anything like that. But when have we seen the GMQS application in Starwood?
Yeah,
a while.
so in the memo, I referred to one that came in 2019.
Mhm.
And they were requesting, I believe, 3,000 square feet. And so a lot of times, I know Chris mentioned that GMQS is all about just measuring rate, but if you go to the actual intent of the purpose of GMQS, it speaks to the type and managing the type. So are you building more residential, or are you building more affordable housing, and the location and the quantity or the quality? So it's not just a rate thing. And so going back to to your question, I guess, is how do you measure proportionality? And a lot of applicants we see in the past, even when there isn't competition, they refer back to, they do research and refer back to other similar applications in Starwood, for example, and they'll say, okay, in 2019, they requested this much, and this was their commitment. We're gonna exceed that because it's 5 years later. So just to give you a point of reference, that application, they committed to a $15,000 donation to do the work in Starwood that they were referring to do that fire mitigation. So I think there is a way to gauge proportionality in looking in past applications. It's hard because every application is different. They're not all apples to apples. So there is a challenge there.
I mean, in the past, like past GMQS applications that I've seen, the one thing of this that we're noting on this one is the gap in the scoring between staff and the applicant is pretty big. So we have like 14 and 24. We have like a 10 with the bonus points. We have a 10-point gap, and usually when we do have even if staff's application in the past, a lot of times we've been like at 18, 20, or where it's been tight and arguments just been over the bonus points. And then that gives the board a little bit more discretion, I guess, with that proportionality to say, are these bonus points the thing that's tipping it over the top? The gap there's a pretty big gap in the points, which is I mean,
It's actually, it's only in 4 categories.
right.
That there's a difference in scoring, and I circled on a,
Yeah, I have your staffing pulled up here in front.
there's only 4 categories, and every other category, our scores are
Match.
identical.
Yep.
So it's the fire protection category, it's the transit and trail system category, water resources and wildlife habitat. And the difference is, the applicant scored themselves at 2 and the staff scored them a 1. And so with those multipliers, it does add up to a 6-point difference.
Yeah.
Um,
So in the code, when we talk about water resources, is there anything about usage on site, irrigation ponds, all of that kind of stuff? Is that an area that can be scored in criteria? Because that's something I know that as we go forward, we're talking about a lot. County is talking about the flashpoint that water. Outside irrigation is by far the biggest user. Inside irrigation or inside usage remaining. So can you be scored higher on water resources if you commit to Xeriscape or some other, something like that? Is that something that's allowed in the code? Because that's something that I can see getting a higher score on if that's what you're doing. It's acres of bluegrass. I mean, then it's not.
Yeah, no, I had it on the screen. Then there are a couple of criteria that are specific to irrigation. One is irrigation water rights, and as Chris said, like this lot doesn't have water rights. The other is implementation of techniques to improve the efficiency of existing irrigation, dedicate remaining water. again, you know, as Chris has sort of said, one is I need the code, two is something beyond that. When you dig a little bit more into the scoring language, it's generally, am I doing something to help the surrounding area? It's not just affecting my lot, it's affecting, you know, those around me. So, I mean, I think looking at that, you know, I don't know, I know Starwood has big open spaces. I don't know anything about how they use their water, how they irrigate, you know. Are there opportunities, you know, would there be an opportunity there? You know, because again, I think something related to irrigation specific to their lot is still gonna be sort of that meeting the code versus going somewhere above and beyond to help, you know, more
But I think
the
also it's a
neighborhood
home,
surrounding area, but.
In my opinion, it starts at home, and if you show less, have less lawn or whatever, that makes a big difference. Right, so, and as I say, it doesn't sound like the code is talking about that. But the commitment that says that we're not gonna overuse, in my term, outside water, I mean, that's an area that you can score higher.
So the Schenkmans and the design team have had conversations around this. And while it would be an additional sort of burden on the property, they're willing to go with a no irrigation on the property. They have a very sort of naturalistic approach to the landscape. And, you know, a future owner may not, but,
For me, that moves it too quick.
and we're willing to harden that as an obligation of the applicant.
Right, I mean, I think that. As I had said, to get to 20 is difficult, given the way this is set up, as you said, there aren't a lot, you can't give us a trail, you can't give us the water rights and all this kind of thing. So you have to figure out where to get that. So, you know, the water piece, the water resources piece makes sense to me.
Yeah, and this is another situation. Starwood is unique, like Starwood has their own irrigation ditch above Salvation Ditch that services just the Starwood HOA. But it's not, and I could be wrong, it's not like the Salvation Ditch where you own rights and you could let those pass on and let that go back into in-stream flow. It's like a communal, right, and it's only used for irrigation. So most houses in Starwood that are irrigated not from their own water system, they're out of this ditch, but there's not an ownership situation where you could like let those CFS flow down and maybe it makes it back into the Roaring Fork, which is, you know, so that's another unique thing. Jasmine, do you have any comments right now or questions for staff or the applicant?
I'm a little concerned about saying that this is because of the location of this property and because of the constraints that the applicants can't achieve the necessary score according to staff's evaluation, and the absence of other competition should be considered in the applicant's favor. But to me, the minimum standard is the minimum standard, and you have to take your property as you find it. If it happens to be in a fire hazard area, it is, and you have to take that into account in your scoring, which I'm still wrestling with. I'm also really kind of disturbed about the fact that if the applicants weren't nice people like the Schenkmans, would we be having the same kind of conversation? And I have a kind of feeling that that's kind of taking us a little bit off the point.
Okay, thank you. So I guess the way with these GMQS applications, the way we proceed is we can either accept staff's scoring, or we can accept the applicant's scoring, or we score it ourselves. Those are the three options we usually have. That's
I don't know, but
well,
I know we let you accept staff scoring.
yeah, well, or we can score it ourselves according to
Yeah,
the,
you could get that.
yes. So, I guess the board has to decide how we want to proceed. If we want to score this ourselves individually, and see what we come up with, or if we want to, if anybody has any more questions for the applicant, on how these points and multipliers work and the proportionality of the donation that was made for the bonus points and how staff sees that and how the applicant sees that.
And I guess the last piece from my perspective is how are we dealing with the 5750 is the number that was generated way after they bought, or maybe not bought, but the house is built or anyway, right? And so whether it's 5750, the TDR gets you to 8250. I mean, 3500 we get to 9250, but the 5750, I don't know if the 5750 really has any bearing at all on anything, because it's kind of a contrived number that happened at some point, 90, whenever that happened, right? So how is the county looking at that house? I mean, I guess there's no record of when it was built, it could have been built 6,500 feet. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it definitely could, and staff's analysis is that there hasn't been any demonstration that it was built prior to needing permits. And a lot of times in these cases, when that happens and there's no records, applicants will do like an area and demonstrate that that's where it existed, or they'll do affidavits from neighbors, but that's not the case in this situation. So staff's assuming, can only assume that it's not legally permitted.
So, I mean, in 87, something, the septic was at least expanded to 5 bedrooms.
Sure.
That was not the record we have.
Mhm.
And we think there's 5 bedrooms now.
5 bedrooms, yeah. And we have the aerial from 91. I think we,
I mean, it's a different thing than scoring on.
Yeah.
yeah, and I think, we appreciate where staff is coming from. We usually, we do a lot of due diligence. And like Aaron was saying, we usually open up the file and there's hundreds of things and plans and sometimes we just hit a 0. And that's what we hit on this property. And I don't think it has anything to do with the Shankmans really, but you open up the file and there's 2 pieces of paper. And they, it was prior to the county tracking floor area, prior to the, growth management, it's prior to a lot of things. So what was acceptable at that time, and frankly, 2 pieces of paper was probably unacceptable even in the 1970s, but there's just a vacancy of information. We don't think it was built illegally, but we also can't prove that, we have a piece of paper that says, well, here's the permit for 6,500 or whatever we think it is. So, given that there's no other applications, we said to staff, look, if you're more comfortable with us asking for the 3,500, that's why ultimately the Shankmans want to build a house of 9,250.
So probably there's, other than the fact that they don't do GMPS, they'd have to do that.
My question for the applicant is just in the minutia, and this is so tough with these, because this is where we really get into we had a work session a little while ago about this system and our concerns with it and how tough it is in situations like these, but the interpretation that the applicant has for the donation to the Aspen Fire Protection.
Mhm.
And that donation is the thing that puts like the multiplier point or the extra point into that category, and also is used, to get the bonus point as well, like as a dual. I've seen other that interpretation is just something I have a concern with, that the donations, are made to get the bonus points in and of itself. And that is sometimes the thing that puts an application over the top.
Mhm.
And to use the donation in sort of a dual format is an issue I would have.
Yeah, I don't know that we're necessarily doing that. I think we could go through objectively and say on each one of these things, the base case achieves a score of 1. And in areas where we are providing additional effort, and that's, and again, there's no other way for us to do it other than cash, right? So it is what it is. But that's where we have said that's an effort over and above the base case. And I'll add, because I sense this, and we've sensed this from staff's conversation as well, that to the extent that the commission is looking at this and saying, I can't get there with a $500 donation. I mean, that's on the table. The Schenkmans are willing to provide additional effort if there's either a number or you want to hear a number from us. And I don't want to turn this into an auction, but the code doesn't provide any guidance on what is needed. And so frankly, it's just, I mean, it is what it is. And I know it's uncomfortable for everyone involved, but if you want commitments that are more commensurate with past efforts, we can do that.
Appreciate that. And that is a situation where we, Suzanne, go ahead.
I definitely do not want to get into what Chris just referred to as, and I know that this is not precisely what you were talking about, but an auction. I used to have trouble with the BOCC doing that with big houses, you give some more to the school system and give so much more to the buying computers for somebody, or I don't want to get into that. That's way too subjective for me. But I have a question of the staff, and that is, I expressed a few minutes ago my discomfort with working on with scoring something that even within the last day or two, the staff has said to us, there are going to be things that are going to be made more clear. And you may get an email from us before you get into this meeting this afternoon, or maybe it will be presented once we're in the meeting. Are you comfortable with moving on with something that still has areas to be tightened up, lines to be drawn, promises to be made, commitments to come up with?
According to less than ideal. In this situation, we're talking about the activity envelope and the steep slopes and bringing that in. I guess there are issues with that. First being that to move on with the activity envelope and site plan review approval, you have to first vote to approve the allocation. So I guess, I didn't further dive into explaining that portion of it.
Yeah, Suzanne, I guess I think I would just add, I mean, staff scored the application that we were presented with, and we found that it didn't meet threshold. Given that, Tammy has evaluated the envelope and the other things, but in the end, for us, when it doesn't meet threshold, then basically we're saying deny the allotment, and therefore you also deny the activity envelope site request. So there's kind of this point of how much do we keep working to try and fix something that we don't even know if we're fixing because we don't know about the allotment yet. So a little bit caught.
Yeah, we have the same.
In that.
Yeah.
So I think in the end, the actual issue specific to the envelope and eliminating slopes is pretty minor from our perspective. It's kind of a cleanup to the envelope. The big issue is, does the scoring meet threshold? So we're even having that bigger conversation about the activity envelope and site plan that they've presented to us. It's in front of us, but it's more inner. Are we shaving off a piece of that envelope to meet the code?
I get it. So what I take from that is that I should move forward with the scoring based on what has been presented in the application and tonight. And that I can have comfort in doing that.
You guys are the deciding body, so you're right that if there's something that you don't feel comfortable with, you're the ones signing the approval. And there is a portion of this application or section standards, I'm sorry, that does state that the application does have to be compliant with all other code sections. So, I mean, we're kind of,
The horses before the.
yeah, it's,
Okay, well, what I see now in hearing what you have said and what Chris has said is that I am to score it as I see it. And if this is not what, if this is going to, if I think it's going to change, if I'm uncomfortable putting the application in front of me because I think it's not really finished, then what I should do is just recuse myself. But I, at this point, I'm ready to score to vote.
Jasmine,
As a matter of procedure, I would like up to make a motion to accept staff scoring and put that to a vote.
I would second that.
we have a motion to accept that hearing made by Jasmine, and we have a second by Doug. And then any other additional comments before we go to vote?
And this is there's a vote just on the scoring.
Just on the.
Okay.
Yep. To accept staff scoring. Any other comments from any of the commissioners before we vote on Jasmine's motion? All right, Jasmine has made a motion to accept staff scoring as it is in the application. We have a second by Doug. Suzanne?
Yes.
Yes.
What was your
Doug?
question? What was your question? I mean, are you calling the question now? You want me to vote now on Jasmine's motion?
I mean, procedurally, I'm not sure where else, I mean, this is where we go right now. Jasmine made a motion to accept staff scoring as is. And
Okay.
Doug's. And so we're voting on this right now.
roll call.
Just a roll call. Yep.
Roll call. Okay, I vote yes.
All right. And Jasmine?
Yes.
You may. Doug? Yes. I vote yes. All right, so that passes.
So can I say something?
Go ahead.
I haven't gone through a lot of these things, and the conversations I've had is that we're not negotiating at this table.
Yeah, I understand.
We're not supposed to do. And there were commitments that we discussed here, the water, some of these other things that I think changed the scoring for me. But we're not sitting here to negotiate, I think is what the point is.
Yeah.
So we're scoring what the written application sits today, not what conversation you might have had this evening.
Sure, I fully understand that.
That's important for me to.
Yeah.
to make.
Thanks for saying that. We certainly understand.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I think what we would like to do as an applicant team, understanding that the square footage is not going to be available through the current application and the scoring we just witnessed. We'd like to withdraw the growth management application portion of the application. The application, the Shankmans still need to go through a site plan review, demonstrate the design. We've talked about the cleanups and the mapping and so on. The reason we would like to withdraw the growth management piece is to keep our application active so that we can clean it up and complete it soon without having to completely withdraw or be denied, which would be effectively the same thing, and then have to reapply and go to the back of the line. The Shankmans are sort of joking earlier that they're not buying green bananas anymore. They're not that old, trust me. But the prospect of going to the back of the line and waiting another year to get to the point where Tammy can provide, comments on the map and so on is a little problematic to them. So if that's acceptable to the commission and to the staff, we'd like to put forward that request to withdraw the growth management application. The Shankmans will need to, use TDRs to get to the square footage and so on, and they may need to make changes to the application to make the square footage work. But we'd like to be able to amend the application to be able to continue on this process without losing significant amounts of time.
I think that's a very reasonable suggestion, and I would certainly vote to approve that.
Looking at Ron. he's
Yeah.
fine.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't know, I was looking at you.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the application originally, they had kind of said, we're asking for growth management. Alternatively, we'd ask, in Starwood, you have the right to use the TDR, we could. And in scoring it and reviewing the application, what Tammy and I discussed and what is in the memo was, right, you can't have two applications going at the same time, so that the P and Z couldn't now say, okay, right, we'll jump into the TDR, but like I said, we'll walk through this various scenarios, so I think in withdrawing the growth management request, they still have an active activity envelope site plan review. And the growth management exemption to use TDR is kind of isn't allowed without further review, like without a special review. So,
Really, Chris, you're just to remain in the pipeline. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the prospect is pragmatic, right? It's a long line.
Any additional comments from any commissioners? No? Bri?
Well, no, I'm just trying to figure out how this could work mechanically. I mean, the code says if an allocation or exemption is denied, any land use applications that are pending for the property shall be denied as well. I see what Mr. Bendon was working there with through since the application is somewhat effectively denied.
I think that's why I was trying to focus on is that
you're
vote
calling it
based
as a
on the
withdrawal.
scoring
Yeah.
versus a decision on the application as a total.
I don't know if this helps, Ryan, but I mean, generally, when they adopt SCAP scoring, that's kind of a one-shot deal. The scoring procedure does provide, if they score themselves, to do an initial round of scoring, have discussion. And then you do a second round, because you might convince each other to vote differently on
That's what I
various
was kind of
categories.
thinking.
So I guess if we considered that their initial round of scoring, that they voted to accept staff scoring, and now we don't.
Just
If
not.
you withdraw, then we don't have a second round.
Yeah,
Is that-
I think I
Does that get us there?
I think I can get my head around that. So let's do that. Let's see the answer.
Better or worse. So then, right, you don't do a second round and there is no final vote
Yeah.
on, right? Yeah, and yeah, we get there.
Unless they're second round of scoring, they make changes enough to bring it into the, I mean, that's the other stuff. I mean, I said we're not negotiating here because I've been told that's not what we're doing.
Right.
But if they refer to us, comment about their scoring, your scoring versus their scoring, and they come back with scoring that you accept, and
Yeah,
it is exactly what you're saying, is it's either a second round of scoring or however we want to say it.
in the applicant told us that, they do have the ability to be flexible with the bonus point system, and if that's something in the, that we're not very comfortable with having like an open auction situation here. So if they did want to come back with viewing the 2019 Starwood application or other pre-existing.
That's, I think we're,
That's where
we're
Doug
not,
is
we're
at.
not,
Okay.
yeah.
The water
We're-
piece is.
Yep.
It's
important
more-
to make
the-
the
it's
fire
more-
protection Perhaps.
Gotcha.
For the
It's more
Probably.
based on the application, if you all looked at it differently than staff and looked at it
Mhm.
more the way, the applicant had scored it and said, we're more aligned with this, then we would have you sit down and actually score. We average out your scores and see if you hit the 20 or not. But so I think in seeing now that if we take that as your initial scoring, you'd be at 14. the applicant has heard that and agreed that they would withdraw based on that, rather than having you take the final vote at 14, which would then send them packing.
Suzanne?
Yes, I have a question for Rye. Because I'm here and you all are there, when more than one person is speaking at a time, it gets very garbled. And so, Rye, my question is of you. It seems to me at this point that the P&Z has done its assigned work. It has scored it, and it came, and it didn't measure up to what the applicants would have wanted. For moving forward now, it seems to me that, right, it's up to you to decide where it goes and tell us, does the P&Z have anything to do with this now? We've scored it.
Yeah, you scored it, and I think what Suzanne was saying, and I think she's right, is that typically the procedural mechanism we do P and Z is to do sort of the straw poll decision to accept staff scoring or not. And we decide to accept staff scoring. Usually there's a final vote as to accept that. What Mr. Bendon has asked is that instead of having the P and Z make that vote final, that his client's application be withdrawn, and allowing his activity envelope and site plan application to remain active. I think you can still do that at this point. I suppose the alternative would be for, no, I don't even want to go there. That would, I think that's okay at this point. Long story short.
So what I would just, by withdrawing the growth management, I guess right now, like this has been, so if that's off the table, I guess the question is, are we taking this back into an administrative review process? Because what put us here in the first place was the growth management, just to make sure that that's clear.
Yeah, I think that you'd have to do that, right? Because you're gonna have to amend any conditions and things like that.
Right, and right now, all that was in front of the P and Z was a resolution of denial, so there are no conditions at this point.
Correct.
To be reviewed, but I think absent the growth management request in front of the P and Z, then the application goes back into the administrative procedure. In which case, to Suzanne, the P and Z's work would be done.
Yeah. Maybe that was your question. I'm sorry, Suzanne, if that's what.
It's okay. I'm
Okay.
just thinking that from this point, this moment on, or from 5 minutes ago on, the P&Z doesn't have any right to say anything about where it goes. We're supposed to score it.
Yes, I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. You are correct, Suzanne is correct, so I think. We're good.
Procedurally, the application has been removed, withdrawn.
The growth management.
The
request.
GMQS allotment for the Shankman Rural Area Residential Addition and Activity envelope has been withdrawn. And then is there any other business before anything else on the agenda that we need to discuss?
No, because there's no, you are taking no action on
We're taking
the
no
rest
action.
of it.
All right,
Yes, I
I
would.
got it.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Or any other comments?
So move.
Move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, second from Doug. Thank you very much. Thank you guys very much. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to us and taking it so seriously. I really appreciate it. And the
Thank you for your
Shankmans do as
time.
well, very much.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
You've been doing that.
Okay.
You must have that on the, you know.